those kinds of non-cognitive skills may actually be just as important or more important for your labor market success than solving a math problem. If you think a big part of your success is just like working in a team and showing up. Others would say no, for certain types of careers, your test scores and your problem-solving ability will matter. Of course, labor market success comes in so many flavors, so this is a very difficult question to answer. And there's a plausible case for all of these things mattering as well. Yeah.
Lower earnings, and more on compensation, and then the high-wage jobs would depend more on the fact that it has
Could be. That would be an interesting way to think about it. To hold many jobs, the kind of basic non-cognitive skills that you need to be a productive member of a team would hold, but to make tons of money as an academic, you really need to do really well on your tests. That's true. Okay, let's keep going. School participation data. Let me talk about that. That's part of why I put that clicker question up, because this is one of the things that we focus on a lot. We were very interested in health affecting people's ability really just to get up and go to school. If you're very sick, you can't even necessarily attend. That's a kind of very immediate channel. We were also interested in test scores, and we wanted to collect this data in as rigorous a way as we could. I mentioned some of the data collection in previous lectures, I think last time. The goal of our school participation data collection system was to get a really representative sense of who was in school by sending teams of enumerators to schools on unannounced days, the schools in the program, and having a list of kids enrolled in those schools and seeing who was actually there. I went through this a little bit last time, so let me go quickly over it again. Who was there, who had transferred, who had dropped out, and they kept track of this. And they visited schools on 4 or 5 unannounced days per year. So they get a snapshot at various points of the year in who's there and who's not there. And so we think this gives a better sense, most likely gives a better sense than most school registers, because we're not really sure how accurate the registers were. As part of this exercise, we actually collected some registers for schools and tried to correlate them with whom we actually found in school on the day of. And they're positively correlated, so that's good. But the correlation coefficient was like between 0.3 and 0.4. So moderately correlated, but not nearly as accurate as we'd hope is actually an enumerator physically seeing someone at school. The other advantage of our doing that is we can track who drops out, who transfers, and things like that. So what do we find? If we look at all the boys and the younger girls, the reason why we split up this way is I think I mentioned before this issue of correct me if I'm wrong, the exclusion of girls greater or equal than 13 years of age. I think I mentioned this, that there was a fear at the time, which has since been dispelled, that the dewarding drugs, I think I did mention it, were embryotoxic. So the fear, the standard practice the WHO and others push at this time is if a young woman could potentially be pregnant, she should be excluded from treatment. That's a pretty radical policy, but that was the policy we pursued, that the Ministry of Health in Kenya, which actually distributed the drugs, was pushing. So girls 13 and older were excluded from treatment. Now this is primary school. There are some girls 13 and older, but they're a small subset of the population. Still, it is a shame they were not treated because it came out a couple years later with further research that there isn't this kind of toxicity that was feared. So let's first look at this population. This is the population that is most likely to be treated. Some of these girls actually did end up getting treated by the public health nurses. So Kenyan government public health nurses distributed the drugs, and some of them either by mistake or by design distributed drugs to the teenage girls. But a much lower share than the population as a whole. If we compare school participation in 1998, so when group 1 is getting treated, to groups 2 and 3, we see these pretty big differences. 84% school participation in group 1, 73 and 77 in group 3. So these are like strikingly large effects, surprisingly large effects. If we look at the older girls, some of whom were treated, but who also benefited presumably from externalities, we still see effects, but smaller effects. So instead of maybe 9 points, it's maybe 5 points in effect. So even these girls were benefiting. Probably further evidence of some within school externalities. A lot of the effect is really coming from the youngest grades. So for the young kids, the gain is about 10 points, from about 70% to 80% in attendance. That's a really big difference. The kids in the older grades to start with, grades 6 to 8, so primary schools in Kenya go from basically kindergarten or like preschool, ECD, early child development classes to grade 8. They have much higher attendance to begin with. They're already attending like almost 90% of the time. And you still see some positive effects, but they're much smaller than the younger grades. So there's at least a couple reasons for this. One is the younger kids tend to have somewhat higher infection rates. I didn't show that. But the 7 and 8-year-olds have higher infection rates than the 14-year-olds. And part of it is these guys are much more selected, much more academically serious. The guys in grade 8 are studying really hard to take an exam that's going to determine whether they go to secondary school. And their attendance is high, and they're studying really hard, and they're just different than second graders. And maybe better able to cope with illness than young kids. Okay, let me pause. Do people see any other patterns here that are noteworthy or other things to point out? Yeah. Can you speak up a little bit, please? Yeah, that's a really good point. Just like there are within school externalities, there could be within home externalities. So if I just happen to have a younger sibling, several younger siblings who were also treated, that could benefit me. If they weren't treated, that could sort of lead to more rapid reinfection. We didn't collect, in this data set, we didn't match siblings in any systematic way. So we weren't able to get at that. But that would be actually really nice because we would have been able to like within family, within school, cross school. So we weren't able to do that as sort of nicely as we would have liked. One thing that we did do, which is similar, but we only did it for a small subset, we mentioned it briefly in the paper, is we went to some of the younger kids who were not yet in school and got stool samples and tested them for worms if they had siblings in treatment versus control. And you do find some reductions in those younger kids' infection rates in the treatment areas. Now, we don't know if that's because of the sibling or because they're in an area where lots of people are getting treated. But there's some evidence of some further externalities. Yeah?
I would say that the older girls' effect might be understated because they might be absent more often because of their menstrual cycles, and so that might be understated.
Could be. That among the relevant days where they would be attending school, the proportional effect is larger. That could be. That could be. Yeah.
Would 8th grade boys be considered in the first category where all boys are?
Yeah. Yeah. The 8th grade boys are in the top. How would it overestimate? That's basically the population that was supposed to get the drugs. That was the idea for that top row. And then the second row, the ones who weren't supposed to get the drugs, even like 20% of them did, as opposed to 80% of the others or something. Yeah.
On the whole, the rest sort of think about reasons for this.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I didn't look at infection rates was that they're accurate. Is that true? Were infection rates a little lower, or was it?
Infection rates are lower among older kids, and I've cut a few slides that I sometimes show when I present this paper just for time, but if you look at hygiene, we try to measure hygiene behaviors and sort of worm prevention behaviors in various ways. We have the enumerators gauge how clean the hands are, kids' hands are. We have them check if kids are wearing shoes or sandals, which will prevent you stepping on the hookworm larvae, and we ask the kids to report how many days of the last 7 days do they actually go play in Lake Victoria, which is the main locus for schistosomiasis transmission, and older kids look better on those dimensions. So, the behavioral change as kids get older is going to be part of the reason why their infection rates are lower, and that continues into adulthood. Okay, so treating worms reduces school absenteeism. So this is, there's really two main findings of this paper. There's two reasons why this paper is cited. One is estimating externalities in a sort of different way than people have done before, especially for worms. And the other one is documenting the strong relationship between child health and school attendance with an experimental design. Now, the interesting counterpoint to these school attendance results are the test score results. So let's first just talk through why deworming might affect test scores. Tests were administered in grades 3 to 8. The feeling was the younger kids were only, like grade 1, standard 1 or standard 2, or what's called standard 1 or standard 2 in Kenya, grade 1 or grade 2. We're basically illiterate in many cases, so we have to do different types of testing. And in subsequent years, we actually did some non-written standardized tests with those younger kids. But in these initial years, we did written academic tests for grades 3 through 8. And why might deworming affect test scores? Some ideas? What's the most obvious channel based on the previous slide? Okay, so if you're healthier, there are these nutritional health gains. You may just process information better, remember things better. Lauren, have you heard that?
I mean, if you're healthier, you're going to be attending school and actually see material on.
Exactly. So these kids are actually in school more. So if you think sitting in the classroom, 7 or 8% more time is going to help you learn more, then you would expect some sort of effect. Roxanne, do you have your hand up or same thing? What other channels could you imagine beyond this sort of cognitive channel and attendance channel? Could there be any negative effects you could imagine? Could deworming negatively affect these kids? Right, so you're in the classroom, but there's also more people in the classroom. There's still just one teacher. So there may be more congestion in the classroom, and that could hurt your learning. What are some other reasons why it might hurt your learning? In a couple % of cases, people do have this vomiting or whatever, but I think that the medical folks would say they're pretty transient. Like, they wouldn't think of that as a reason. It's very salient for a day or two, but not beyond that. That's my sense. Yeah. Right, so in addition to the teacher, it could just be everything is sort of in short supply. One thing you might think of is if you're healthier, you're dewormed, you're healthier, now you're trying to decide how to spend your time. Maybe before you were kind of low energy, you didn't want to run around with your friends and play soccer, you stayed home and studied, and now all of a sudden, like, you're a better soccer player, and it's much more fun to play when you're a better soccer player, right? So people's time use changes when they're healthier. They can just choose different activities, and maybe they'll put some of that extra time into schooling, but maybe they'll put it in other stuff too. And we don't have kind of detailed enough time use data to know exactly how that happened, but it's not necessarily the case that when you get healthier, your time use stays the same. Yeah?
If kids just miss standardized tests, like you said, they count as missing or they count as a zero?
So we had various approaches to try to get them to take the test. We would admit.
I'm thinking, like, if they actually have increased attendance, like kids who wouldn't have attended to take the test,
Yeah.
take the test would be worse when you count as lower attendance.
Exactly. So you're raising an interesting point, which is maybe there's selection into the test taking. So maybe in the treatment schools, all these kids that are kind of weak students, they're kind of sickly because of deworming, they're like just barely attending a little bit more, they take the test. And those weak students aren't taking it in the control schools because they're homesick, let's say. I mean, that would be one sort of story. We did try to limit this by offering the test again, and we actually, for people that dropped out, we administered several hundred tests at people's homes to try to get the data, but we didn't get the same follow-up rate. So there's still some concern about your point, about like differential composition of test takers, basically. Okay, so increased time in school, maybe greater efficiency of learning while in school. Overall, the basic finding here is even though there are big school participation effects, there are no test score effects in our data across multiple subjects. These are like basically, these are based on standard Kenyan academic tests. Like the standard 8 test is very close to what's called the KCPE, the Kenya Certificate for Primary Education, which is basically your kind of graduation exam from primary school, and your score allows you to enter secondary school. So these are very kind of well-established academic tests in the Kenyan context, and they're just like dead on zeros. Now the next year in 2000, we went back and we administered tests even among younger kids. We did non-academic tests. We did various things that are more like IQ tests, like cognitive processing tests, memory tests, all these other things. Zeros on all of them. So take the zero result on test scores seriously. It's really a zero. There's this question why, and you guys have kind of mentioned most of these, but not all of them. Increased congestion in the classroom is one story. That could be part of it. So now instead of having 30 kids in the classroom, there's 34 kids in the classroom, and maybe that makes a difference. Maybe those extra few kids in the classroom weren't the strongest students to start with, and maybe the teacher's spending more time teaching to them. Who knows? The other thing, and this came up in a conversation after class last time, has to do with the quality of the classroom environment overall. Maybe it's the case that a little bit of extra time in the classroom really isn't that decisive in terms of your learning. Maybe most of your performance on tests is driven by your home environment, how much your parents read to you, your innate sort of ability, academic ability, or other things. And maybe that extra 5 days in the classroom a year, or 10 days in the classroom a year is just sort of a small factor. Yeah. There are, well, English is pretty good. It's pretty spoken quite well in Kenya, but there are Swahili tests, there were math tests, there were English tests. The exams we administered afterwards, all the instructions were given in Kiswahili, and for these IQ style tests. So exams have been both written and orally given in English and in Kiswahili. Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that we don't get into as much in this paper, but my co-authors, or some of my co-authors have a paper on this. It's Paul Glevy et al. And I forget what year, maybe 2005 or 2006. Have a paper on what happens in this same part of Kenya when they did an experiment giving out textbooks in the schools. And it's sort of right at your point that the level of the textbooks, in terms of the level of difficulty, was basically way too hard for most of the kids in these basically poor rural schools. So maybe if you spend more time in a classroom and the textbook is not really entirely appropriate, you're going to learn less. There's been some other studies in Kenya and other African countries and in South Asia and in Southeast Asia, et cetera, where spot checks have been done to measure teacher attendance. So it turns out to be an incredibly pervasive problem in developing countries that teacher attendance is very low. So in these Kenyan schools, when we've done spot checks of teacher attendance tends to be between 80 and 85%. That's not great. When you do spot checks like that in some rural Indian schools, it's in the 70s. So if in any given week, one day, the teacher isn't there, that's not very good. The teacher may have very good reasons. They may have to go far away to get a paycheck. The teacher could be sick. They could have lots of other responsibilities. But of course, it's going to hurt the kid's learning. That'd be the equivalent of my just not showing up for, I don't know, 3 lectures or something, or 4 lectures. Yeah. Yeah, it could. And in some of the other studies we've done, we found that the kids' interventions lead to greater attendance among teachers. So, that could be part of the story. That could be part of the story here. Yeah. At the end of the year,
I
yeah.
was gonna say, I don't know, like what type of standard I said this, but I feel like a lot of times, like my experience, I said, like I won't improve, even though I have like another year or two of learning, and that's like more relative to the way the test is when it's established. And
Yeah.
in some ways that it's like it's not presented the same way, or they're like applied, or it's like more tricky. And so I don't know if it would be like more simple to have testing that's like more basic or hands-on, or like not as
Yeah, we did a couple of different things. Those sort of concerns were why we also administered these other totally different types of tests the next year. We also changed the difficulty level of the tests in subsequent years to make them all easier, just to get more variation in ability, because in the initial times we were using a standard Kenyan test, our population didn't do very well on these tests. So a lot of people did very poorly, so we weren't sort of getting as much variation as we wanted. Okay, so next time I'll get to cost benefit, and we'll wrap up health.